Hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Today, Mackenzie and I will be doing a short yet informative rant about IPRCs. What is an IPRC, you ask? IPRC stands for Identification, Placement, and Review Committee, and what this committee does is determine whether or not a student should be formally identified as a pupil with an exceptionality such that they need placement in a special education program. The outline of what an IPRC is and the procedure for an IPRC is outlined in the Education Act of Ontario, specifically Ontario Regulation 181-98, Identification and Placement of Exceptional Pupils. The IPRC committee is responsible for determining if your child will be formally identified as having some type of exceptionality. Right off the bat, there is a problem here. According to the Education Act, there are only 12 categories of exceptionalities. So if your child does not fit within one of these 12 categories, then you are automatically at a disadvantage, which is that your child will not be formally identified and they will not be placed in a special education classroom. If your child is formally identified by the committee, according to the regulation, the committee, before anything else, must consider placing your student in a regular classroom with additional services and supports. Not only that, but some school boards, such as the Durham District Catholic School Board, go so far to say that they will always, yes, always, come to the decision that your child should be placed in their home school in a regular classroom. So if you are in the Durham District Catholic School Board and you want your child placed in a special education classroom, you will never get that placement. Instead, you would have to move to a different school board where they still offer the option to have your child placed in a special education class.
Furthermore, the IPRC, according to the regulation, does not actually determine what supports your child will receive for their exceptionality. There's an individualized education plan that does that. In actuality, the IPRC committee all it does is determine what type of classroom your child would be and should be placed in. The committee can make recommendations about which supports they think a student should have, but according to Regulation 181-98, those recommendations are not binding and cannot be enforced or appealed under the regulation. Another thing about the IPRC regulation is that it stipulates that every year there will be an annual IPRC review for the students. With this in place, it is possible that one year the committee will change their decision and put the student who has been in a special education classroom into a regular classroom. While this is potentially a good thing, it can be a difficult and upsetting decision for the parents if they did not want their child removed from a special education placement. So the IPRC seems to have complete authority over decision-making with little input from parents. In fact, if a parent disagrees with the IPRC decision, then they have to go through a very lengthy process of appeals in order to try and get the decision overturned. The appeals process is specifically laid out in Regulation 181-98, and it stipulates that depending on the appeal, that the process can take many months. Also, if the parents decide to take their appeals all the way to the Special Education Tribunal, so the court, it can be a costly process for the families as well as the school board.
In practice, IPRCs are also known to be tedious and not a welcoming environment for parents of students with special needs who are looking for a placement with support. Because of the way the IPRC process is laid out in Ontario Regulation 181-98, an IPRC is typically a very long meeting that uses a lot of educational jargon that can be overwhelming to parents. Additionally, there are usually many professionals in attendance at the IPRC meeting, which can also be overwhelming to parents.
I've had the pleasure of being a part of IPRC process with my job within the school board. From what I've learned, and according to Regulation 181-98, an IPRC is supposed to be a committee that forms and holds an unbiased opinion of the child in question. As such, the committee should make an unbiased suggestion as to where the child needs to go and what kind of supports the child deserves. However, in my experience, this is not what happens in practice. We feel that there should be an easier way to complete the IPRC process and to get the same information out in a more welcoming and inviting environment. If the information that is being presented during an IPRC meeting was delivered in a way that everybody could understand, would be a huge start.
Our next suggestion would be to have a more inclusive seating arrangement. This would allow the parents to feel more like they are truly a part of the process because in the end, it is their child and they do know best. Maybe sitting around a round table instead of the traditional rectangle table would allow the group to feel more inclusive. In the end, does this process, as it is currently laid out, actually meet the goal that we as educators are trying to accomplish, or is it really just another hoop for parents to jump through to get the true help that their child may need? We believe that Ontario Regulation 181-98 needs to be updated so that the IPRC process is more inclusive and less intimidating and confusing for everyone. Thank you.